Yeah, hi, good morning everyone. So let's start the session. In the last class we have finished with the chapter number 3, and today I'm going to start with the chapter number 4, that is a feasibility study. So in this chapter, first of all, there is a objectives, that is the objective of this one, objective of the feasibility study, then introduction about the feasibility study, then system performance definition, that is what is the system performance definition, that consists 3 parts. One is the statement of constraints. Then next one is identification of the specific system objectives. The next one is a description of the outputs, that is a system problem or system performance definition. Next one is a feasibility study. So 4.3 is a feasibility study that consists multiple parts like feasibility considerations, economic feasibility, technical behavior, and what are the various steps in the feasibility analysis. Then 4.5 is the summary. After that, there are the various questions. So these are the few topics that is covered within the 4th chapter, that is the feasibility study. So what is the main objective of this one? So what is the main objective? First point is how the project selection will be conducted. That is how the project selection, or why we are selecting the project. That is how the project selection will be conducted. Then what are the various steps involved in defining the system performance? So what are the various steps that is involved in defining the system performances, or why we are using the system performances, and what are the various stages that is involved in defining the system performance. Then what are the key considerations that are involved in feasibility analysis? So what are the various key considerations, what are the various key areas in which, or key rules in by which that are included in the feasibility analysis? Then how to conduct the feasibility study. How to conduct means how to follow or how to use a feasibility study. These are the few objectives of this chapter. So first one is how the project selection will be conducted, then what are the various steps, then what are the key consideration in the feasibility analysis, and then what is the, or how to conduct the feasibility study. In the last chapter we have finished with the project selection, that is how to select the project. So this is the next chapter, that is the feasibility study. The first part is the introduction. Introduction includes the project selection phase is over, resulting in completion of the various activities. So when we talk about the various activities, that project selection phase, that is over the, or that is over the, resulting in completion of the various activities. And what does include? That includes the recognition of the need, that includes the determination of the user requirements, then initial investigation. The next one is the verification of the objectives, constraints, required output, and the required input. So these are the few activities that is taken out within the project selection phase. So first one is the recognition of the need. So if there is a need that is required by the, what is the main recognition, why the user demand for this one. So recognition of need means carrying out the needs, then determination of the user requirements, then initial investigation. After the initial investigation, that is the starting investigation, there is the verification of the objectives, constraints, required output, and the required inputs. So first is requirement of the need, or recognition of the need, or identification of the need, then determination of the user's requirement. Then what is the what is the initial investigation, then verification of the objectives, constraints, required outputs, and the required inputs. And the next step is to determine exactly what the candidate system is to do by defining its expected performances. That is, what the candidate system is do. What is the main requirement of the system that is defined by the expected performance, and therefore a feasibility study is carried out to select the best system that meets the performance requirements. And it comprises of the identification, description, and evaluation of the candidate system, and finally select the best system for the job. So first of all, it defines or it identify the system, then describe the system and evaluate the candidate system, and choose the best system for the job. That is, the best system means a perfect system for the job. And the feasibility study recommends to the management either the most effective system, or conclude that the system may not be involved. So either to give the most effective system, or either to conclude that the system may not be involved. Now, we have finished with the introduction, that is what we are going to study, or what is the main expectation that is covered in these activities. And the next step is to determine exactly what the candidate system is to do by defining its expected performance. Therefore, a feasibility study is carried out to select the best system that meets the performance requirements. And that also comprises of the identification. Okay, Okay, Mitty Benjamin, not an issue. And feasibility study recommend to the management. Okay, all right. For the selection of the best system for the job, and there's the feasibility study that recommends to the management either the most effective system or conclude that the system may not be involved. The next one is 4.2 is system performance definition. That is, what is the meaning of the system performance? Why we are using the system performance? As a system required performance is to be defined by describing its output in a user acceptable format. So whenever we are defining the system, we are defining by describing its output in a user acceptable format and at a higher level of details than what would describe in the initial investigation. So first is defined by describing the output in a user acceptable format, and there's a high level of study or high level of detail than what was described in the initial investigation. So when we talk about the system performance, that means this is a detailed explanation about the product that is covered in the user acceptable format. And this involves three steps. There are three steps in the system performance. One is the statement of constraint, then identification of specific system objectives, then description of the output. So the first step is statement of constraints. So what are the various constraints that is available? That is known as statement of constraints. Then identification of the specific system objectives. So identify what are the various specific system objectives or what are the various targets for the systems. Then description of the output. Description of output means what is the output, but what we consider with the output, that is a description of output. So one is the statement of constraints. Next one is identification of the specific system objectives. Then next one is the description of the output. And this phase builds out on the previous phase in that much of the work that may already have been done. Now, let's talk about the first one, that is the statement of constraints, or the statement of the rule that is known as the constraint. So constraints are the factors that limits the solution of the problem. So limit the solution of the problem means what are the various solutions that is occupied with the with this problem, and some constraints are identified during the initial investigation and are discussed with the user. So when we talk about the initial constraints, when we talk about the constraint that is carried out with the factors, or that is carried out with the various factors that is carried out in the statement of constraints. So first one is the statement of constraint that includes that limits the, or the constraint means a limit that limits the solution to the problem. Some constraints are identified during the initial investigation and some are discussed with the user. There are general constraints that is used in accordance with the required performance of a candidate system, and the current billing system and department handling billing and customer payment phase problems. The result of the fact-finding phase of the initial investigation revealed the following general constraints. There are some constraint that is revealed by the initial investigation. For example, when we talk about the general constraint that the president views safe deposit billing as a low priority, he has a false impression that the computers are not needed as long as customers can have access to their boxes. That means they have their boxes to view the impressions that the computer are not longer needed to use the computers. The accounting department has been pushing for installing a computer-based journal ledger application for months, and the vice president of operations, bogged down with auditing and operations problems, continued to share the request. And management has a limited knowledge of computers, although it has several applications on the computer: checking and saving, installment loans, commercial loans, and the trust. Then there is a safe deposit. So while doing better than breaking even, that is not projected to grow as fast as it did in the early 1980s. So there's a recent success in controlling the have a great impact or have an adverse effect on the demand for the books rental in the journal. Now, if the online system is to be reinstalled, it must interface with the existing checking saving application to allow for the automatic payment of the books rentals. Now, next is how to identify or identification of the specific system objective. So how we can identify what the system objective, that is a specific system objective. So once the constraints are spelled out, the analyst proceed to identify the system specific problem of performance objectives. So once the constraints are spelled out or constraints are identified, the next step of the analysis is to proceed to identify the system specific performance objective, and they are derived from the general objectives. That is the general objective that is defined in the project. So we use only that objectives also for the purpose of the initial investigation, right? It is derived at the end of the initial investigation, and the steps are to state the system of benefits and then translate them into measurable objectives. In our scenario, the candidate system and anticipated benefit are as follows. So what are the various candidate system that is anticipated? So first one is improved collection schedule, then cost reduction, then physical space reduction, then improved customer service. So first one that is defined is the improved collection schedule, then there is a cost reduction, then physical space reduction, and improved customer service. And each benefit is analyzed and translated into the measurable objectives. Each unit or each benefit that is analyzed and translated into the measurable objectives that is carried out within the content, and the collection is improved by billing the 30 days in advance of the box renewal data, and one more notice is sent within 2 weeks for billing of the 30 days. And the cost reduction that is also realized by reducing the payroll by 2 employees and placing the microcomputers in the place of one of the 4 existing desks that reduces the physical space requirements. Then placing the MasterCards and the rental information online improves the customer service, therefore reducing the waiting time of entry from 3 minutes to 30 seconds. And these objectives are effective in comparing the performance of the candidate system with that of the current system. So whatever the system that is available, so that is used in comparing the performance of the candidate system. And the information-oriented flowchart, that is the input-output analysis sheet, and the data flow diagram are produced in the initial investigation that leads to the conclusion. What is the main conclusion? That is the current system is inefficient and there is a new online terminal-oriented system that will be the solution. There are 2 types of solution. First one is the current system is insufficient or inefficient, and the new online terminal-oriented system will be the solution. And this conclusion was reflected in the general project directive submitted to the user for approval. And this information is used as a basis for preparing specific objectives for the candidate system. So whatever the candidate system that is acquired, that is used for the specific objectives, that is used in preparing the specific objective. Now next one is description of the output. How we can describe the output. So final step in the system performance definition is describing the output. Describing the output means describing the layout, describing the report that is required by the user. And there is an actual sketch of the format and the content of the report, that is layout, as well as a specification of the media that is used, their frequency, their size, and the number of copies that is required at this point. That means what is the meaning of the layout, what is the meaning of the structure. That means a media, what are the various media used, how frequently it is used, what is the size and the number of copies that is required at this point. For example, if I want to distribute to the n number of companies or 6 number of companies, that is we have to use the copies, we have to generate the copies of the 6. And specifying exactly what the output would look like leads to an estimate of the computer storage requirement that also forms the basis of the file design to be undertaken in the design phase of the life cycle. That is what are the various life phases, what are the various file design method that is used in the design phase of the life cycle. And the analyst is now ready to evaluate the feasibility of candidate systems to produce these outputs. So what are the various output that is acquired, that is used by the analyst, that is now ready to evaluate the feasibility of the candidate system. Now we have done with the system of constraints, we have done with the output, that is the description of output. Now next step is, or the next topic is a feasibility study, one of the main topic, one of the main stage of the SDLC that we have already discussed, but in not in detail. Now this is in detail, that is what is a feasibility study. So let's start with a feasibility study. So many feasibility studies are used for both the users and the analysts. That is used by the users and the analysts, so that is beneficial for both the users and the analyst. The first of all, the study often presupposes or pre-assumed that when the feasibility document is been prepared, the analyst is in a position to evaluate the solution. So when the document is prepared, so it's very easy task for the analyst to, it's a very easy task for the analyst to be in a position to evaluate the solution. Second, most study tend to overlook the confusion inherent in the system development. There is a constraint and assumed attitude. And if the feasibility study is to serve as a decision document, it must answer three questions. Now, what are the three questions that is answered by the feasibility study? Whenever any analyst can face, or whenever any analyst can use a feasibility study, so there are three questions in this one. What are the three questions? Is there a new and the better way to do the job that will benefit the user? What are the costs and the best savings of the alternatives or alternative? What is recommended? So first one is there a new, or is there a new and the better way to do the job that will benefit the user? So is there any new way and the better way to do the job that will benefit the user or not? What are the various costs and what are the various savings? That means what are the various benefits and the cost of the alternative or the alternatives, and what is recommended? Recommended means what is the recommended solution, what is recommended for the feasibility study. So first one is any new and the better way to do the job, then cost and the savings of the alternatives, and what is recommended. And the most successful system projects are not necessarily the biggest or most visible in a solution, but rather those that truly meets the user's requirement. So whatever the user requirement that is faced, that the user requirements are truly met by the recommended solutions. And the more project will fail because of the inflated expectation than for any other reasons. So this means that in feasibility study will answer whether we are comfortable with the techniques, whether we are comfortable with the cost and the savings of the alternative, and what is the recommended solution for this one. Now, what are the various considerations that is followed? What are the various types of the feasibility study? There are three key considerations that are involved in the feasibility analysis. One is economic, behavior, and the technical. One is economical feasibility, one is a technical feasibility, one is a behavior feasibility. So let's talk about one by one. First one is economic feasibility. That means, or this analysis or this feasibility is the most frequently used method for evaluating the effectiveness of a candidate system. So whenever we are using the effectiveness, or whenever we are using the evaluating the effectiveness of a candidate system, that is the most frequently used method, that is known as economic feasibility, and most commonly known as the, or also known as the cost benefit analysis. And the procedure is to determine the benefits and the savings that are expected from a system or from a candidate system and compare them with the cost. So whenever we are comparing with the cost, that is used to determine the benefits and the savings that are expected from a candidate system. That means first of all identify the cost and identify the savings, and what are the savings that savings are also expected, that are also expected from a candidate system, and compare them with the cost. And if benefits outweigh the cost, that means if the benefits are more than the cost, then the decision is used to design and implement the system. That means if the profits or if the benefits are higher than the cost, that means there is a profit. So direct solution goes to implement, or that decision is to made to design and implement the system. Otherwise, further justification or the alternatives in the proposed system will have to made if it is to have a chance of being improved. So if there's a chance of being improved, that is also the one of the major decisions that is also taken within the economic feasibility. And this is an ongoing effort that improves inaccuracy at each phase of system life cycle. This is an ongoing effort that is improves or that improves in inaccuracy at each phase of the system life cycle. That is economic feasibility. Next one is the technical feasibility that centers around the existing computer system. Centers means that focus on the existing computer system, that is the hardware, software, and so on, and to what extent it can support the proposed system. That is as to what extent it will use the proposed system for addition. And for example, if the current computer is operating at the 80% capacity, and there's a ceiling, then running another application that would overload or that could overload the system or require the additional hardware. That means what are the various techniques that is required in the feasibility, that is required in building the system, For example, whether it is operating at the 80% capacity or whether it is operating at 60% capacity, and then running another application that could overload the system or require the additional hardware. This involves financial and the considerations to accommodate the technical enhancement. That means what are the various financial considerations that is used to accommodate the technical enhancement, and if the budget is serious constraint. So if the budget is one of the constraint, one of the hurdle, so that the project is just not feasible. Because there is no budget, there is no money to handle out, to carry it out, or to use the technical feasibility. So then the project is not just not feasible. Now the next one is the behavior feasibility. So people are also resistant to change. So whenever we are using the behavior feasibility that are related to the human being, that related to the people. So people are resistant to the change, and computers have been known to facilitate the change. So if the facility that is used for the change, that is used to facilitate the change, so there is a behavior feasibility that will change from time to time, and time to time. An estimate could be or should be made of how strong reaction the user staff is likely to have towards the development of a computerized system. So what are the various methods that is used, or what are the various reaction that is used or likely to have towards the development of the computerized system? And it is common knowledge that the computer installations have something to do with turnovers, transfers, retraining, and changes in the employee job status. It is common knowledge that the computer installation will work or will have something to do with turnovers, with transfers, with retraining or retrainings, changes in the employee job status. So it is also one of the behavioral feasibility, whether what are the various behaviors, what are the various attitude of the people that is required, or that is very much required while developing a system, while making or building up a system. Therefore, it is understandable that the introduction of a candidate system requires special effort to educate, sell, and train the staff on new ways of conducting the business. So that requires extra efforts or the special efforts to educate. So give the knowledge, that means educate, sell out, and train the staff on a new ways of conducting the business. New ways means what are the various new techniques, what are the various new rules, criteria that is followed for conducting the business. Now, in a safe deposit example, 3 employees are more than the 50 years old and have been with the bank for over 14 years, and 4 of which are in the safe deposit, and the remaining 2 employees are in their early 30s. They safely joined, or they joined safe deposit after 2 years before the study, and based on the data gathered from excessive interviews, the younger employees have want the programmable aspect of the safe deposit, that is billing, put on a computer, and 2 of the 3 older employees have a voice resistant to the idea. Their view is that billing is not a problem. Billing is not a problem, but the main focus is on the customer service that provides the customer support, personal contact with the seller, with the maker, with the hardware, that provides the import, or that provides the emphasis on the customer support. That means the personal contact with the customer, personal relationship with the customer, personal content, or the emphasis on the customer. And the decision in this case was to go ahead and pursue the project. Now next is, what are the various steps in the feasibility study?